What's up, everybody? Welcome to Mongols. This is our prediction show where we're going to take a little look at what's coming up with Rhode Island this weekend and the Hounds. There's also some news that we're going to touch on. I am Mike. Joining me for this one is Justin and the Mondo. Justin, how's your week been so far?
My week has been, it's been good. It started with the day off, and I don't know that it ever felt like I had the Monday off. I never felt like I had Monday off. It was just a busy week, but it was a good week nonetheless.
I noticed you're rocking the Charlie Pittsburgh sweatshirt. Well done. Leaning back, putting it on full display.
I'm excited for cold weather and hoodie season.
I will say I was surprised. We were at Dick's Sporting Goods in Greensburg, and they had like an entire rack of just Hounds gear. I was like, get out. That's cool. Like jerseys, keeper kits, warm-up stuff. So it's getting out there, which is great. Mondo, it's been a minute. How you been?
I've been good. I'm excited because something I've done will be on display at Highmark Stadium tomorrow.
Can you share?
You'll see it. Sure, actually. I actually put together some stands for us to raise the TIFO on. So I'm excited. A little glimpse behind the curtain, I guess. I think previously there had been some telescoping poles that weren't doing too well, so I put together something that we were actually able to work with the Hounds to actually get anchored to the stands themselves. So I'm excited. They will be there.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's all I got there for that. But I'm excited.
No, that's very, very cool. Good for you. Well, guys, let's get into the news. There's a lot of different things going on with the team before we dive into the Rhode Island conversation. So the biggest thing that came out over the past few days with the Hounds have signed Burton Jockesson on loan from Real Salt Lake in the MLS. So he previously played with Pitt with Jackson Walty before being drafted 16th overall in 2023. For the past 2 years, he's mostly split time between RSL and their MLS2 affiliate Real Monarchs. Justin, we kind of theorized if the Hounds were to bring in somebody, what kind of position would we hope to see? I feel like I was the only one that said forward, but I really liked your justification as to why not forward. This is clearly a forward. What are your thoughts on Burton here?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. We had some conversation in our Slack, about, is it worth bringing in a forward at this point in time? Like, what is, he hasn't done too much in MLS or MLS2. And so like, what can we actually expect? I think it's interesting to me because I think forward is one of those positions that there's a large gap between USL quality forwards and MLS quality forwards. And I think like where some other positions, I'm not sure the gap is that big. And so I think it will be interesting to see kind of what he brings to a team. I don't know anything about the Monarchs and how good they might be in USL 2 or MLS 2. And so I can't make any assumptions based off of that. But I do think it's not worrying to me that he hasn't done anything in MLS. I think we've seen some strikers who have gone from USL to MLS, Daniel Rios, Cameron Lancaster, some of those guys come to mind. And none of them super panned out in MLS play anyway. So do I have a lot of large hopes for this guy? No, but do I think it's possible that he comes in and makes an impact for the Hounds? Yeah, I do. I think there's a different quality of play there that could make a difference. And so I'm excited. I think it's just another, striker option. And our striker options so far this season, whatever you think of Sterling, and potentially he's just in Bob's doghouse, but whatever you think of Sterling, Musha obviously hasn't panned out. And so behind, is a DN, and I'm blank. Oh, wow.
EJ.
Yeah. Like behind those guys, we don't really have anybody. And so, it's just another option. So we'll see what happens this weekend.
Yeah. Mondo, thoughts on Burton?
I'm cautiously excited. He collected quite a bit of accolades at Pitt. Not as much since, but while he was at Pitt, he collected. He was on All ACC second team 2 years, which is, I mean, to get named to an All anything team is not easy. So, and he was like top. I think he was fifth in assists one year and fourth in assists the other year. So like, it might not be that we've got ourselves somebody who can score goals, but it might be that we have somebody who's going to get the ball in dangerous positions, and that might be the missing. I mean, who knows if that's the missing component? I don't necessarily think that's the missing component, but we also have backup, especially with Etu out right now in with the African Cup of Nations. Right, it's the Cup of Nations right now, or qualifying. It's something. He's on international duty.
He's on international duty. Yeah, we'll get to
that. With him out, it seems like he's almost like for like fill in. So we've got coverage there. So I'm hoping to see an Etu like presence on the field. I think that's shy of him scoring on his debut and becoming a club hero and legend out of nowhere. I'm going to keep my expectations baseline.
I mean, it was one of those things where the team started teasing earlier in the day that, when is the roster freeze, just to like hint that something was coming. And so I think we all started speculating, okay, what could this be? Could you be messing with chemistry this late in the season? How did this work? One of the things that's obviously clear is the Pitt to Riverhounds pipeline is strong, because this is a guy, who knows, this might've been a guy that we were interested in, kind of like Jackson Walty, and he was just too good to go straight to the Hounds. So we knew of him and we maybe thought he was a good fit. It just didn't work out at the time. But then the flip side of it is that he has played with Jackson Walty before. So this isn't like he's coming in, knows nobody, has to kind of mesh really quickly. He does know one of our midfielders who is used to feeding him balls, productive balls. And so that at least gives us a jump start on things. No word on whether or not he will actually be eligible for this weekend. The team didn't say anything. I think the hope is that he's probably at least on the bench, but we shall see. But I'm like you guys. I think I'm cautiously optimistic. Let's see what happens. We did something similar. Was it last year that we brought in Kizza late from, was it the Revs? And, Kizza was able to make an impact in a few games, and, enough so that we kept him around this season. So maybe we can do the same thing with Burton. So, exciting stuff. Guys, moving on to just some other news here. Danny Griffin ended up winning goal of the week for his goal against Indy. That is the only time the Hounds have won goal of the week this season, all things considered, with, 8-game stretch with only one goal. Not entirely surprised, but congrats to Danny. It was a good volley. We talked about it a little bit last week. And Asumanu was named to the USL Team of the Week bench for his contributions in the draw with Indy as well. And then, Mondo, to your point, Etu is officially with the Congo national team on international duty. He will miss this weekend, but he will be back next weekend when we take on Tampa. One of the things I'm just curious, your guys' thoughts on, we talked about this a little bit internally, is I think it was announced middle of this week that Etu was with the team. And we kind of knew because he missed last week. And if you just follow him on Instagram, you could see that he was with their national team. So it was like, why does it take so long for the Hounds to announce that he was on, or why did it in this case? Justin, do you have any thoughts on that or any feelings about that?
Yeah, I feel like we talked about it, kind of on the reaction show and why the lineup was the way that it was. And I could see Bob playing some games of like, let's not announce it yet. Let's let Indy, let's have the game against Indy and then not have it in the lineup. That there could be some gamesmanship there that would make sense. But I also feel like this is a chance for the Hounds to say like, hey, look who we have. Look what our players are doing. But on the same side of things, I don't like San Antonio had a couple of players at international duty, and they only announced it middle of this week as well. And so maybe it was just I don't know, maybe it's normal to wait until kind of they're actually there or whatever to announce it. But yeah, interesting move. I feel like I want our players celebrated in that way if they're doing good things like that. And so I'd rather it be announced quicker than slower, but it's what it is.
Yeah. Mondo, where do you
to
stand on that? Yeah, go ahead.
Oh yeah, sorry. To that point, I mean, I found out Cole Palmer was back from international duty before I found out Etu was out from the Hounds. Like we had an official announcement from the club. Hey, Cole's back. Yeah. Before I found out that Etu was out, from the Hounds. Yeah. And we've seen the same thing with injuries where we've just seen players just disappear. Like I think we still don't know the status of a couple players from last year who've just like vanished. And I don't think that's, if I'm going to be critical of that approach, because if that's the mind games you're playing, then we have nothing in the bag then. Like we should have other mind games we can play rather than, oh, is somebody going to play? Is that because teams are going to prepare for our best players no matter what, right? Teams know what Bob Lilly is coming with. It's not a surprise when Bob names a lineup because it's pretty much a back five. It's pretty much a midfield three. It's pretty much a front two. And you're going to have those two wing backs who are going to be making runs up the wings. That's the Bob Lilly way. That's what I saw last season. That's what we saw this season. So at least my view of Bob Lilly's playbook is almost a 100%, of this system. I think there's been like 2 games in that time where we were doing a 4-3-3 or a 4-4-2. And on top of that, it's not as though the other team doesn't know, because you'll have the commentators go on, especially, and I can tell this especially for away games, and they will say, oh, here's the list of Hound players who are unavailable due to injury. And it's like, oh, are they injured? Are they injured? And so the commentators note it. Is just not in any official announcement from the Hounds. And I just think that's weird. Like, if the press knows, if the other team knows, then who are you hiding it from?
Yeah. It'll be very interesting this weekend. So the team has announced sort of who's out on injury. And really, they said the only 2 missing players that we'll have this weekend are Pat Hogan, because he picked up a red card, and Etu, because he's out. Otherwise, there's no injuries. So last week, Blackstock didn't play, wasn't in the 18. If he's not in the 18 this week, then what does that tell us? Like, is he? It's the same thing with like Musha Galusa, and like we know that there are injuries at other times. How much of this is they're injured versus they're just like in the doghouse, and like what? It's just the lack of transparency into what's going on, especially with some of these guys that you're used to seeing in the starting 11. Just gets frustrating from a fan perspective.
I mean, I think it gets frustrating from a player perspective too, because I can think of the number of times that as a player, if my coach didn't say, oh yeah, he's sick, that's why I didn't name him to a lineup, versus like, I just am a no-show on the list. People are going to say, well, does he even care about the team? Is he putting in the effort during practice? Like, where's his head? And it's like, no, I'm doing everything I can. I'm like injured, like, you know, and like, I don't think that's a good taste in a player's mouth. Like, I don't see anything constructive, but maybe that's because I'm coming at this from the wrong angle and I don't understand like Bob or the front office's perspective on this, but it doesn't feel good.
Yeah. Agreed. 2 other bits of content that you can go out and check out. I did catch up with Luke Biasi in our pre-gaming episode. That was a lot of fun. He talked a little bit about sort of the walk up on game days where, now it's become a thing where the team always takes their pictures and picking out outfits and how that all goes down. And then he also talked about bouncing back from recovery and sort of his process after a game day. And it was a really cool conversation. So make sure you go check that out. And then I also talked with Caroline Fitzgerald from Goals. They are working closely with the Hounds on the USLW team. And so she had a lot of really cool insight about what she's doing on that end and why women's sports. I mean, it literally feels like it's a sleeping giant. So it'll be very interesting to sort of see what comes from that. So make sure you go check out both of those, in your podcast feed or over on YouTube. Guys, beyond that, the big news, obviously, Rhode Island comes to Highmark Stadium this weekend. Justin, you finally bit the bullet and said this is a have to win, not a must win, but a have to win. Dikwa is coming back. So is Mark Ibarra. Dikwa only has 7 goals this season, which is tied with Kizza. So it feels like, you would expect him to go and get more. It was interesting. I was on the Tide Talk show, which is their fan podcast. And they actually had people like writing messages in asking me like, what is the right system so that Dikwa will crank out goals? And I'm like, well, he's kind of a poacher and like he kind of made a lot happen on his own, which was one of our complaints last year was that it was like Dikwa or nothing. And so it just feels like that's not how Rhode Island is structured. Last time we played, it was a 0-0 draw. If we compare sort of the most recent 5 games that we've played, but we've actually played 2 of the same teams. They lost to Indy 1-0. We tied them 1-1. They beat Birmingham 2-0. We beat Birmingham 3-0. So we've fared slightly better against the teams that we've both played in the past 5 games. But beyond that, they currently sit 5 points ahead of us in the table. So 3 points here will be massive. As I mentioned, no Pat Hogan on defense. Justin, are you concerned about Pat not being there?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there is something to that of like, man, this is one of our best defenders who has put in a lot of good shifts this season. That being said, I think Sean Suber is just getting better and better, and I think he at this point in the season can organize the defense. And then Biazzi and Asamanu have not played. It's not like these guys are they haven't played yet this season and now we're throwing them in a situation, it's not that. So both those guys have played a fair amount this season. So I'm not like overly concerned of like, oh man, no Pat Hogan, now we're gonna lose. But I think it is a thing that the Hounds will have to figure out of like, all right, how do you run the system? Now you don't really have that much coverage on the bench as far as defense goes. And so you're going to have to figure that out a little bit. It probably could be a game where we see the Danny Griffin center back role, which I'm not super excited about, but that's one to cover. And so how do you cover it? I don't know. I'm hoping that it's just Hogan, Asamanu, Suber, but we'll see.
Yeah. Mondo, thoughts on Pat Hogan being out?
Pretty much the same as Justin. I think I would be, if it wasn't for the fact that Etu also is out, it'd be whatever. We're going to obviously miss our tallest player on the field, or our tallest outfield player, I should say. You always do. But I think Suber has done a pretty good job. And I mean, he's been definitely stepping up and communicating with the rest of the team. Like I've watched him yelling at the other defenders or even midfield. Like he's communicating, and I think he's taking that like very unexpected. It's really interesting that we have 2 essentially like brand new Hounds players who are taking like semi leadership roles in Suber and Etu. But so yeah, I have no problem with Etu or Suber filling in for Hogan. My concern is I'd rather have Biasi as a defender rather than as wing. And so that raises the question of, are we going to play Rovi? Are we going to end up with another midfielder in defense? And I'm afraid we're going to end up with a defender with a midfielder in defense. I'm afraid that's the way it's going to go because I don't want that.
I wasn't even thinking about the Griffin like the center back thing because I think I've just kind of blocked that from my memory because I hated it so much. I think if we can go, I do like Biasi out wide and talking to him. I know he likes to be out wide more, but I think as sort of a makeshift thing, if we could go to a back 3 that is Suber, Biasi, and Asumanu, that to me feels like the most obvious thing. But obviously, we are not Bob, so I don't know what Bob's going to do. And I also think, I would be more worried about this if we had Pat all season and like we haven't had to make do without him yet. And that's just not the case. There was obviously the span in the middle of the season where he picked up multiple injuries and he was out for a few weeks. So we had to learn how to play without him there. And literally we were in Indy and we played all but 4 minutes down a man without him. And we still came out, with a 1-1 draw, which we still argue could have been a 1-0 win. So I think that under normal circumstances, yes, you absolutely want him in the lineup, but I don't see this as being a like, oh crap, everyone's on panic kind of situation because we've never experienced this before. We have. So now it's just a matter of adjusting and hopefully we can power through it. Justin, what do you think we'll see from the Hounds in this one? Do you think that like Danny Griffin at center back is something that might actually show up in the lineup?
Oh, I hope not. I think. I mean, here's the thing, and I said this, earlier this week. I think as much as there's have to win games at this point, they're like this one is it. You're in a situation where you're 5 points behind the team that you're playing. 3 points there is massive. It crunches the table a little bit more. It puts everybody else on edge a little bit, all that kind of stuff. I think I said this earlier in the week, Friday night, the Hounds will get to sit and watch Louisville hopefully beat up on Loudoun. And all right, cool. Now you're going into the game on Saturday going, okay, we can pick up a spot in the table with a win here, at least. So I think I hope that's what happens. And so I hope that gives them some motivation. Even if Loudoun happens to go in and get a result somehow or win a tie, I hope that gives the Hounds motivation to say, okay, we got to keep up with them. But I know that Louisville's coming into that game going, okay, we clinch our playoff spot if we win this game. And so that gives them a little bit of extra motivation, even though they're sitting, high at the top of the table. So I hope the Hounds come in just motivated of like, all right, cool. We can pick up a spot. We can keep pace. We can crunch the table a little bit more. Like there's a lot we can do here to help ourselves in the playoff run. And so I'm hoping we see a motivated team, whatever the lineup, happens. I hope we see a motivated team who's coming out fighting for each other and hoping to win the game. I did think it was interesting. I peeked back at the lineup from the first game, and it's pretty much the same lineup we're putting out there today. It felt like there was a time this season where we were really kind of like moving around. But Forbes started that game, which Forbes hasn't really started the last 5 or 10 games. Has played but hasn't started. Walty was on the bench but didn't get into that game. But almost everybody else, the sub patterns were almost exactly the same. All that kind of stuff. Sterling and Kizza started up top together. So it wasn't that much of a difference. So I just hope the Hounds come out motivated and with the crowd behind them at home against a team who. They're in their first season. They know what it means to have this kind of pressure, playoff cooker atmosphere. I don't know, and so I hope that's what the Hounds can take advantage of.
Yeah, Mondo, how do you think things will shake out here?
I actually think we should have our eyes on Birmingham instead of Loudoun, and the reason for that is Loudoun has 2 games in hand, and you can pick up a point out of 2 games fairly easily. It's a lot harder to pick that point up from 1 game. So I think we should just pretend Loudoun isn't there. Our goal is Birmingham. Birmingham's only 3 points ahead. This is like we need to either keep pace, catch up. And if we catch up, we beat them on goal differential. That's what we're looking at right now. Indy is only a point ahead of them. And again, we have the goal differential. That's our target zone, I think. So I think here on out, this like every game is going to be key. Every game is really important. This one and Birmingham are going to be the big 2, I think, in the near future, because those are 2 home games. Those are 2 big. I mean, I think all we have left pretty much for the rest of the season is 6-point games.
We have one. El Paso is the very last game of the season, but otherwise, everything else is against the East. Yeah.
And I think one. Actually, I'm going to backtrack now. I think one of those games is against Charleston, right? So that one maybe doesn't matter as much.
Yeah.
In the. I mean, we want the points from it. I'm talking like the grand scheme of we're never going to catch Charleston, so taking 3 points off Charleston is going to do nothing, because they're. I mean, they almost have clinched playoff as well.
Right.
I think mathematically, technically, they could get passed by somebody, but they've got it, right? Yeah. So other than that, we're looking at 4 points separating Detroit from Loudoun, and then we're 2 points off that. So that's the play. I think we pretend Loudoun doesn't exist right now because they have 2 games in hand. Indy also has 2 games in hand, so we can't really count them. And what we should be looking for is that -8 goal differential on the Legion. That's going to be the if we can just get above the Legion. And so in the same vein of Loudoun losing points, let's keep pace. Eyes on Birmingham. Let Loudoun do their Loudoun thing. Eyes on Birmingham, because we can take points from them. We can jump them as long as we match or better all of their results for the rest of the season.
Yeah.
The interesting thing about Birmingham is Birmingham doesn't play this weekend. And so they're off on the weekend, and then they play Tampa Bay midweek. And so I think that is an interesting thing of we put a lot of pressure on their game on Wednesday with a win on the weekend. And then the other thing I think is interesting, that the other team that you kind of threw in there that I hadn't thought about was, Detroit is 6 points ahead, which seems like, all right, that's a gap to cover, but they got to go west to El Paso this weekend, and then New Mexico comes into town next weekend. And so could they lose 2 games in a row? Probably. So, all of a sudden you're talking, hey, we're right there with Detroit too. And so I think, none of those teams 4 through 8 I don't think any of those teams are uncatchable. But here's the thing for me. The thing for me is the Hounds have to take care of their own business, right? Yep. And so until you're at a spot where you're controlling your playoff fate, you've got to take care of your own business. If Hounds lose this weekend, then everything we just discussed becomes pointless. And so it's all right, cool. You've got to figure out how to beat Rhode Island at home, and then let's watch what happens with the other teams.
Yeah. Yeah. Agreed. And Justin, to your point earlier about, hopefully the team comes out motivated after sort of the result this past weekend. That was something I actually asked Biasi about. And he said, no, they absolutely, he said it could have been very easy for them to get deflated in Indy after the draw. But he said the feeling in the locker room was almost more inspired because it sucks. They gave up the goal, but to know that they were literally down to 10 men most of the game, and he said they could feel it, that the goal was coming, they were gonna take their chance and do it. That's more of a boost to them heading into this one. So I am hoping to see sort of a motivated team that goes out and really tries to just, put Rhode Island to the sword and get a few quick goals and kind of end it. Let's do score predictions. Justin, how do you think this one shakes out?
I think the Hounds win 3-1.
Woo! Okay.
I think the goals come. I also could see them being motivated defensively too. I think, you touched on it. Man, we held our own for 90 minutes of that game without being a man down, and I think it could be all right, no, let's go actually get that clean sheet this weekend. So I think they could be motivated both ways, but I'll go 3-1.
Mondo,
I'm gonna go 2-0 actually. And I'm going to say there's going to be a midfield goal this week too. I'm going to say a midfielder will definitely score because that seems to be the trend.
Yeah. I like it.
I was going to say, if the Hounds score, a midfielder is going to score.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I like the shout. I think I said on Tide Talk 2-1. They were feeling like them. Listen, I will say if you haven't listened to that episode of Tide Talk, go check it out. It was a lot of fun. They do a really good job, and they had people leaving comments the entire game. So when it came to prediction time, it was like everybody versus me, and they were all like 1-0, 2-0, and I'm like, I don't know, guys. Like I don't disagree that I think it's going to be a tough game. But they were picking all of the wrong reasons to me as to why it would be a tough game. So like, oh, you're not going to have Hogan. It's over. And I'm like, oh, we just basically beat Indy without him and we were down a man. So like, we could do this. I think what will be interesting is Dequa coming back to town. He's used to playing at Highmark. Ibarra's back in town. He's used to playing at Highmark. So that'll be an interesting dynamic. But again, I'm like spoiling everything from the Biasi interview. It was just go listen. But he said that it's always fun when guys like that come back to town because it's almost like a brotherly rivalry, and you almost want to beat them even more because it's just like fun. Like you want to get one over on like your good friends. So I feel pretty comfortable with the 2-1 call. I could see a shutout. I would love a shutout, but I think we do get at least a few. And this is a situation where we need 3 points. Rhode Island could do with 1 point. So they don't have the pressure of having to come in and beat us. We have to make something happen here. And I think, from what we saw in the last game, if we can thrive under that pressure again, I feel pretty good picking a win. So, yeah. That, ladies and gents, is what we think. Obviously, let us know what you think. The game is this weekend at Highmark Stadium. Mad Chad Taylor will be there juggling stuff at halftime. Do with that what you will. It was on the info sheet that the team puts out. So I guess don't miss Mad Chad Taylor throwing chainsaws and other stuff at halftime. Guys, any other final thoughts for this one?
No, gotta get a win.
Yep.
Yeah.
I want to put another tally mark on my armor.
Yes. Yeah. So there you go, Hounds. Do it so that Mondo put a tally mark on his armor. If for nothing else.
No other reason. I just want tally
No
marks.
other reason. Yeah, exactly. Well, thank you everybody for watching and listening. That is what we think. Like I said, leave your score predictions in the comments. Be sure to go subscribe so that you guys be first to get these on YouTube and on your podcast player of choice. Otherwise, we will be back talking more about the Hounds probably Sunday. We'll do our recap show, and then we'll be back into another week of just show after show after show to get you ready for Tampa the following week. So thanks, everybody. We will talk to you again very, very soon.
This is the way.